So, hi again, I'm Claudio Vera, and welcome to Access and Equity. Welcome to the first installment of this series that we have coming up. And tonight's installment is going to be real-life crowd testing with Fable. And with us from Fable, we have Sam Proulx, who is an excellent speaker and who is a real pleasure to have. He's come and spoken for us here before in South Florida, and it should be an interesting night. So a little bit about Access and Equity, which is a series that we're going to be kicking off. So Access and Equity, I had a hard time figuring out what I was going to call it. Like, is it a show? Is it a webinar? Is it a meetup? Like, how do you categorize this? And I kind of found myself calling it different things to different people. And I felt like the labels that we had just kind of didn't quite match really the intent that I had for this. But if anything, this series I'm hoping is going to turn into interesting and friendly conversations about topics that deeply affect us. And I started this out where I wanted to cover digital accessibility, and not from the technical or practitioner angle, but really more from the angle of its social importance. And, I'm sorry?
Jan. Jan's just saying hi.
So that started me down this whole rabbit hole, you know, of a slew of related topics that we're going to be covering in the series. And the slew of related topics isn't necessarily just digital accessibility. So I want to be able to touch on stuff like disability rights, accessibility in general, the future of technology, assistive technology, artificial intelligence, human ability, social bias, and most of all, ethics. So because as we build new technologies and as we have assistive technologies and as we try to be inclusive, it starts creating all kinds of dilemmas and conundrums for us. And so I hope in this series, we're going to be able to explore some of those. So I started putting down ideas for events, and I started listing, here I could do an event on this, I could do an event on that. And before I knew it, I had a 2-year backlog. I had like 25 different ideas for events. And I would say, like, why? Well, there's a ton of really, really interesting people in this field. And the irony of COVID is that with COVID, they're all like really accessible now. So, I actually was starting to find that it was easier to get people to agree to speak on this show than it was going to be to ask friends to come and join me in my backyard for socially distanced drinks. So it's who knows? I mean, these are the times that we live in. So through Boca Code, and we have Todd Albert here from Boca Code, but through him, I had the pleasure of meeting Beth Wagmeister. And Beth is an advocate for deaf inclusion and a truly, truly wonderful person. But I'm going to let Beth do an intro for herself.
Hello, everybody. It's very awkward for me to talk and sign at the same time, so I'm going to try. Normally, I'm just quiet, moving my hands, and I have the opportunity tonight to share the screen with the wonderful Claudio. I've heard about him all day today at Boca Code's training. I was like, wow, he's really an awesome person. So it's a pleasure to be here with you tonight and through the series. So thank you for the opportunity. A little bit about me. Again, I'm Beth Wagmeister. I am a deaf advocate and I'm a change maker. How many of you are change makers? Hopefully all of you are saying, yes, I am. So I just think that's super cool. I just learned that term and I'm sticking with it. I just think it's awesome. Change maker. I've been an interpreter since 2008, and I've been connected into the digital tech world here in South Florida and beyond. I'm really excited to be walking through the door and being involved with making sure that everything is accessible and equal for all people. So with that, typically the interpreter doesn't talk. They're quiet, as I said, but we're volunteering our time tonight and next month and the following month and all the months on. So I'm volunteering my time to co-host as well as interpret at the same time. And just some good housekeeping, sorry, is to take turns when talking. Try not to talk over each other because it's very confusing and who's talking. If you want to pin the interpreter, if you need access to see me, huge. And if you don't need it, but you want to see me huge anyway, feel free to pin me. And also, so that's just a little disclaimer. We're not doing things as ethically as possible because of the fact that, this is not a paid job. So it was hard to ask other interpreters to come and volunteer their time. But maybe if you know anyone interested who wants to join our team and is willing to do the volunteering interpreting, let us know. As far as also, if you're talking, it would be wonderful to get into the habit of introducing yourself and describing yourself a little bit for all of our blind and visually impaired people on the call. So I will start with that. Again, I'm Beth, and I'm wearing a black shirt. I have gray hair, asymmetrical, although it's probably not really important. And so that way we can try to get an idea of what you look like if we can't see you clearly. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Claudio, and I'm really excited to be on this journey with all of you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm thrilled tonight that we have the folks from Fable here. And Fable is a company that's kind of in a unique situation. So right now, corporations are really not doing a whole lot, or organizations and governments are not doing a whole lot to test how well their products work for people with disabilities. And that's a problem. I mean, we're using bots to test. We're adding single lines of code to make our sites suddenly accessible. But none of that really speaks to usability. And Fable is a company that assembles panels of people panels of people with different and various disabilities to do accessibility testing on digital products. Now, I foresee a future in the next few years, like maybe 3 to 5 years from now. I foresee a future where any major brand, any major corporation, any government wouldn't dream of rolling a product out without having it tested in the way that Fable is doing it first. But you guys have the pleasure of having Fable here tonight. They're probably the premier company in the space that is doing this kind of testing. And so consider, like, the whole conversation that we're having tonight is like a glimpse into the future of UX testing and what it's going to be for people with disabilities. So now I'd love to be able to turn it over to Sam. And Sam, you can probably give a better intro or a better description than I possibly could.
Hey, thanks so much. I'm incredibly glad to be here, glad to be back after speaking to folks in South Florida a few months ago. You had me back once again, so incredibly glad to be here. I'm Sam Proulx. I myself am completely blind. I am a full-time screen reader user, and I'm extremely passionate not just about accessibility, but about accessibility, about usability, and about community building, and building communities of people, all of whom live with disabilities, who can, work together and contribute to be not just single change makers, but change makers together. And so that's really, there are so many reasons why I'm so passionate about what I do at Fable Tech Labs. My current title is community manager, and so what I'm involved with is the recruiting and growth and support and shaping of our excellent community of diverse folks, all of whom work with us on a contract basis, all of whom live full-time with some kind of disability, and who are full-time kind of daily users of assistive technology, because it's that real-world experience that's so incredibly important. Describing myself in physical details is something that I am absolutely terrible at, because it's certainly not how I think of myself. But I'm a middle-aged male Canadian working on growing back the beard. I love having a beard, but every once in a while I get frustrated and trim the whole thing off and then let it grow back in. So that's as much of a physical description as I will go into. But great to be here, and I'm incredibly excited to talk about Fable, to talk about the testing and accessibility landscape, and to talk about what we're doing, where we're heading, and what the industry is doing, and where it's heading as well.
Awesome, Sam. Well, let's kind of shift gears a little bit, and maybe let's talk about Fable itself. And, I mean, we've got Alvar here too, if she wants to pipe in at some point, who is one of the founders of the company. So, I mean, I wanted to ask you guys, like, why was Fable formed? I mean, what was the purpose that you guys were trying to achieve with Fable?
I mean, the great thing about Fable as a business is that it solves two problems in a very interrelated way. The first problem is that if you are a company who wants to do testing with actual users who use assistive technology and use those kinds of products on a daily basis, it's not an easy thing for you to do. I mean, we feel very strongly that doing that testing is something that every company should want to do, and that in the very near future, every company will want to do, because usability testing with people with disabilities is crucially important in order to ensure both accessibility and usability. So on the one hand, what Fable does is it helps companies get access to that community in ways that they may find very difficult or impossible to do. And it also helps them be able to turn around, whether it's research or testing, in a timely manner, so that testing can be done early, so that it can be done often, so that retesting becomes possible, and all of those things. And on the other side of it, there's the sort of the community side of it. There's a side of it that is working with people with disabilities. One of the things that I really love about Fable is the impact that we are able to have on getting folks employment, because use of assistive technology is a skill. It's something that can take years to learn, and it can take even more time to become prominent at. And so the impact that Fable is able to have on the other side is making sure that this valuable skill is properly recognized, and is properly compensated for the work that folks with disabilities are doing, and for the value that we offer, and as well as giving some folks who may not yet have had an on-ramp into kind of the employment world, getting them into that employment. We've had some folks who have started working with Fable as kind of their first job, and have used those skills and talents that they've been able to learn while working with us to go on and get full-time jobs in the accessibility industry. And that's so crucially important, because we need the voices of people with disabilities in this industry. I mean, not to downplay the work that everyone else is doing, because we need all hands involved in this work. But the more representation we can get of people with disabilities in not only the accessibility testing and the user research portions of things, but as people in companies who are actually responsible for accessibility, and doing that work, the better off things will be. So there's kind of two sides to that, and I've talked a little bit about it from my perspective, as one of Fable's very earliest employees, but I'm not quite the founder. I don't know if Alvar would like to jump in and add something to that or not. I think we're fine either way, but entirely up to you.
Yeah, happy to jump in. Hi, everyone. I'm Alvar. I can describe myself. I have extremely long hair. I am wearing these big golden glasses that I say is my Ruth Bader Ginsburg inspired glasses. And I'm the co-founder and CEO of Fable. So Claudio, you asked why we started this. So my background is in design. I've been a designer. I've worked in large organizations, and I noticed a lot of designers probably look like me, are in the same age group as me, and we're designing technologies that are used by a very diverse group of people. So the goal with Fable was to make sure that how do we integrate the voices of diverse groups in every stage of the design process so that the end result will be accessible. I have biases, and each one of us have biases, and we need to make sure that we're checking it. And the only way we can check it is by ensuring there's a wide variety of feedback coming from people who actually live with the problem. So that's the main intention with Fable, is we're hoping to change the way researchers, designers, developers, QA analysts think about accessibility by engaging with the very people who experience it.
Right. It's like check your biases at the door as a designer. It's like, you build something, you propose a product, and you have your biases tested. You have your apps tested so that you can see whether or not you're designing really truly for the audience, or you catching yourself designing just for yourself. And I know when I started out working in digital design in the 90s, you could get away with that because the only other people that were on the web were people like you. The only other people that had managed to figure all of this out were young techie people who were like early adopters and stuff. And then it eventually became much more democratic. But now in 2021, I mean, that mindset is just dead wrong. And, I'm a huge fan of yours, if you can't tell already. A huge fan of what Fable is doing and the business model. And I see you guys like being incredibly well positioned to like the enormous growth and demand that's going to be happening in the next few years. So props to you for that.
I think there's something super interesting about what you were saying about how things have changed and how design has changed from sort of the 90s into 2021. A talk that I've given a couple of times is sort of a little bit on the history of accessibility and on my experience with accessibility, because I was extremely lucky growing up. My father is also completely blind, and he was also an IBM employee for over 30 years. And so I got to grow up with the latest and greatest in accessibility technology and see it change and see it evolve in ways that a lot of other people didn't have access to, and that was such an incredible privilege. And I think the other big thing that's changed is that computers in the 90s and digital technology was almost optional. I mean, in 1996, nobody looked at you like you were nuts if you said, "I don't have an email account. I don't do email." Whereas today, digital technology is integrated in every single thing that you do, whether you're trying to get a job or buy a movie ticket or listen to music or just anything at all. Even more so now in the time of COVID, as we can no longer even go into physical stores to shop. So digital technology has changed from something that was maybe new and interesting and fun and a bit of a luxury to something that is critical in order for everyone to kind of carry on the quality of life that we would all like to.
So in terms of digital technology, I mean, how do you guys approach it in terms of how you guys embrace technologies? Because you're fusing technology and community to be able to do the sort of testing that you do. I mean, do you maybe want to elaborate a little bit and tell us a little bit about how that works?
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of the work at Fable for the people with disabilities that we contract with, it's very flexible, and it's very on demand. So they have a platform that they can log into and see kind of what work is available for them to take on and at what times. And we have folks who accept as much or as little of it as they are able to, just like with any other on-demand job. But one of the key differences there is that if you are a person with a disability, you want to work, but you may not be able to sit at a computer straight for 8 hours a day. Or you may not be able to work certain hours because you may be dependent on say personal support workers or on on other things like that. You may be doing a number of other things. We've got folks who work with us who are students. We've got folks who work with us who are parents. We've got folks who work with us from all stages of life. And one of the things that our community really values is being able to have the employment, but also being able to have the flexibility to be able to kind of work a little bit on their schedule and work in times and in ways that work for them, because especially with this community, that's so important. But I think I might have gotten a little bit off track there and not sort of answered the question that I think you might have been going for, which was sort of more on what kind of testing we do and how that works.
No worries, no worries. I mean, but you started mentioning, for instance, on people in diverse sort of situations that they have in their life, like parents, students, people who can't work full time because it's too strenuous or too difficult for them somehow. But do you want to maybe talk a little bit about like what are the different ranges of disabilities that you have among your testers?
So we work with all sorts of different assistive technologies. So we work with folks who, like myself, use a screen reader. We also work with folks who use screen magnification, so enlarging the screen, color reverse, color contrast, all of that stuff. But we also work with what we tend to call kind of our alternative navigation community of folks, and those are folks who, for one reason or another, really struggle to or can't use the standard kind of keyboard and mouse. And so we have folks who use Dragon Naturally Speaking, or who use the voice control software on their Mac computer and on Windows, because they just maybe cannot move their hands at all to use a keyboard. We have folks who use switch systems. I don't know if you're familiar with those, but switch systems are basically for folks who perhaps voice recognition doesn't work for them because they also struggle to speak. And so a switch system allows somebody to use the computer equally, even if all they can do is press maybe one or two switches, or a single switch, or just move one finger. Technology has come to the point where there are assistive tools like Grid 2 and Tekla that allow everyone to have access to computers, and so that's another community of folks that we work with and that who test websites for us. And of course, as you can imagine, for some of those folks, kind of full-time traditional 9-to-5 employment could be pretty challenging.
You're on mute, Claudio. You're on mute.
I am so sorry. It has to happen at least once. We should have a drinking game for this.
Hey, you scared me for a minute. I thought my internet had got disconnected, and I've been sitting here talking to myself for the past 2 minutes.
I could have had you turning it up louder and louder, and then started shouting and made you jump.
Oh boy!
Wow.
So the next question I want to ask you is, like, I know you and your line of work, you use a screen reader a lot. I didn't know if you wanted to show those of us who aren't familiar with screen readers, if you wanted to show us, like, give us like maybe a little 5-minute demo of how one of those works.
Sure, absolutely. I would love to. Sometimes you can talk about all these technologies, for a long time, but there's nothing that can replace seeing it in action. And I mean, that's another one of the reasons that testing with folks is so powerful, because if you're working at a company and you've been able to do, say, some video testing with a person with a disability, and actually see how they use your website and how they use your product, not only does it make the things that need to happen very clear, but it also really helps give a face and a name and personalize the problem to make it easier to socialize and easier for people to understand that, hey, what we're doing isn't just checking a checklist. Like it's more important than that, and to understand why they're doing what they're doing. So if you give me just a little minute here, let me see if I can't get over and share my screen. And we'll get some screen reader audio and go over a little bit of how all this works. All right. And you should have my audio, and that should be full screen. All right. So one of the first things that you'll notice is that the voice that I am using is at an extremely high rate of speed. And that's the case for a lot of people who are blind and who use screen readers, because we want to be able to access information as quickly as possible. We want to be able to access it, just as quickly as sighted folks might, who can sort of speed read faster than you can listen. And so as we get familiar with the highly robotic, highly artificial sounding voices that our screen readers use on purpose, we can begin to go faster and faster and faster until you get up to 300 words per minute, 400 words per minute, and I know sometimes even faster than that. But what I'm going to do right now is, so that everyone can follow along, I'm going to go ahead and slow down the screen reader voice just a little bit. And one thing that I did want to point out as I go ahead and do this, this is one of 5 different settings interfaces that NVDA offers. And there's 19 categories of settings in this one page. And the reason that it's so important to me to point that out is because this is why it's so important to test with actual users. Very few users take a screen reader out of the box and use it with all of the default configurations. We've spent years customizing it to behave exactly the way we want it to behave and to meet our needs. And so for someone who, say, doesn't use a screen reader and is just, installing something and testing with it just to see how well it works, the experience that you're getting is nowhere similar to the experience of a user who uses this, every day, all day.
Variant call might differ.
There we go. So that's that'll slow us down a little bit.
Voice can apply. Can OK space.
And I will get out of the settings dialog.
Might differ has left the waiting.
And here we are. The website that I'm demoing today is super simple. Just because I don't would want us to spend too much time on it. But one thing that I really like about Google News is the way that it's semantically laid out. And I really like to stress the importance of that to folks who maybe are not as familiar with a screen reader. Because heading levels, whether it's a heading level 1, a heading level 2, and marking buttons with the correct kind of semantic information is so important, because our screen readers have hotkeys that let us jump around a page. So if I want to go directly to search for something,
no next edit
I can press a single key and jump right to an edit field, or
main landmark, save for later,
or a search button, or whatever I've got going on. So for example, here I can use a single hotkey to jump from one heading to another that's on the same level.
Main landmark headlines link heading level 2.
Not interested in headlines.
Canada link heading level 2.
No.
World link heading level 2.
Now I want more world news, so now I can switch to navigating by heading level 3.
NASA rover streaks toward landing on Mars. World news link heading level 3. Texas send. Ted Cruz says he went on vacation amid storm coronavirus : WhatsApp Samuel Robles.
And so if there's a story that I want to find out more about, I can then navigate by heading level 4 to sort of see the stories Google's listed under that.
What's behind the drop in COVID - Samuel.
And so it's really able to replicate the same example, the same sort of skimming experience that a sighted user would have. But the only way that that's able to happen is because the designers of this particular page have thought very carefully about the semantic layout and about what it should be in order to allow for that skimming. I apologize. We've been hearing a little bit of background audio. Zoom is happily informing me of everything that's going on in the background in our Zoom meeting here as I'm doing the screen share. But that's just a little demo, little taste. I mean, screen readers have thousands of hotkeys to navigate by button, form, heading, field, checkbox, table, all kinds of things to help us skim pages and to help us get to exactly the part of the page that we're looking for without having to just read the entire page from top to bottom. But what I'm going to go ahead and do now is I'm going to stop our screen share before Zoom
May has left the waiting room for
gives us some more interesting news here. I'm not quite sure why that's happening. I thought I had disabled reading of those events, but apparently I did not, and I apologize for that.
meeting control, meeting mute, stop share left space.
There we go. All right. Now those messages will only be in my headset as opposed to broadcast out to the entire world.
Well, Sam, that's amazing. Like that you've got, on one hand, you've got one layer of how you're navigating this page, and it's a really straightforward page. And then you've got these little alerts and announcements coming in and kind of interrupting. I mean, how distracting is that for you? Or are you used to multitasking?
I'm very used to multitasking. But I will say it's a lot more distracting when the voice is reading kind of at 250 words a minute. When I'm listening at 350 words a minute, it takes half a second to say so-and-so is under the room, and then it's done and it's gone and it's over. But I'm very used to listening to multiple voices at the same time. I actually buy kind of gamer headsets for that reason, because they allow me to connect my phone to the headset, my computer to the headset, some other device to the headset, so I can actually be listening to 3 devices all at once without kind of too much difficulty.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing or super distracting.
Well, I mean, in some ways, I think it's a little bit less distracting because I'm just hearing it. When a notification comes in on your phone, you sort of got to look away from what you're doing and look down, right?
Right. I mean, as a sighted person, like, to me, the equivalent would be like walking into a sports bar and just having nothing but screens there and trying to focus on the person you're actually having dinner with. Just the sensory overload of that. I wouldn't say I was nervous, no. But I mean, obviously, you started with a screen reader at a pretty young age. I mean, what would it be like for somebody who is new to this? I mean, what's the learning curve or the on-ramp to this like?
Unfortunately, it is a pretty steep learning curve and a pretty steep on ramp. I mean, I've been using a screen reader since I was 8, but for folks who are newly blind, or who have a diagnosis of blindness, or who are dealing with that, it's a question that I encounter a lot. One of the things that I do is I moderate the blind subreddit on reddit.com, which is kind of the official subreddit for blind folks, and but did that long before coming to work at Fable, just because community is important and it's something I'm passionate about, and that's a question that we get really often from folks who realize that they are losing their vision, or who have been diagnosed with vision loss, or who have just lost their vision, who come in to the community for support and who have that question, what's next for me, which I think is very interesting. I'm incredibly glad that folks, like our community on Reddit, are available to help answer that question and to help support folks. But I also think it reveals kind of an interesting problem globally, with perhaps lack of help and lack of support for folks. Reddit is a great website. I spend a lot of time there, and I don't want to knock it, but if you think to yourself, I now have a medical diagnosis that's going to change my life, where do you have to be at to say, I'm going to go ask about this on Reddit, right?
Right. It's not the place you would think of going to first.
No, it's certainly not. It's a a little bit more perhaps of a rough and rowdy, shall I say, corner of the internet. I think in a lot of ways, and so I think it's interesting that we do get that question so often. But I mean the best advice is, it's a big change that you're going to go through, but it's not an end. It's a change. And so the best thing that you can do for yourself is if you have the time, if you can, is to prepare. And if you already have vision loss, the best thing that you can do is get all the training that you can. Because screen reader use, yes, it's a big learning curve, but it's something that you can either teach yourself or it's something that you can be trained on. And every bit of training and of self-education that you do will result in an enormous increase in your independence. And that's what matters so much. I remember when I first picked up a screen reader, this was back in the day, there were no CDs. And so it was, I think, the training manual for those early versions of JAWS, probably someone will correct me, but I want to say it came on either 12 cassettes or 16 cassettes, something like that.
Oh, wow.
And but the training has always been very good, and because it was audio, it was very very tutorial based. So they'd show you how to do something, and you'd pause the cassette and you'd do it yourself.
Wow, that's just fascinating to me. I'm learning so much from you, Sam. This is just incredible information. I'm like trying to keep up with you, but just overwhelmed with all of this really cool information. Thank you for sharing so much of this with us.
Hey, well, I apologize for making you try to keep up with that screen reader for a while there.
Yeah, I created something fun. I don't even know what happened. It was just a blah, blah, blah kind of thing. Move my fingers. I created the sign, I think, tonight for speed talking.
There you go. Yeah, unintelligibly fast screen reader needs its own sign.
Hey. So I have a quick question for you, Sam. What advice would you give someone who's disabled and could be a potential tester for you?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we are always looking to grow the community as Fable continues to grow and the amount of available work continues to increase. If you are a person with a disability and you already use assistive technology, I mean, if you can surf the web and fill out forms and are confident on the web using your assistive technology, you've probably got what you need in order to work with us, because we offer training on how to do testing and on Fable's policies and on how to kind of do that accessibility testing work. So the place to go is makeitfable.com/community. You can read more about the opportunity there, and there's also a form that you fill out, and once you do that, then you hear back from me, and we have a little initial interview, and you go through our onboarding process. And come to work with us, and really the most important thing is that you are able to use your assistive technology confidently, and if you can do that, then you can almost certainly come to work with us.
Wow, that's great.
That's awesome, Sam. I mean, and when you say like using it confidently, do you mean like, okay, you're like an intermediate level user, an advanced or expert user?
We don't expect you to know how to program, we don't expect you to know how to go in and modify your BIOS, right? We have advanced users, we have expert users, we have people in our community who are programmers and who do that, and who can offer some of our customers advice when they're using the kind of the wrong ARIA landmark or whatever, but it's certainly not something that we require, because we're really focused on the user experience of what a regular assistive technology user would be. And so if you're able to if you were able to register tonight and get into tonight's Zoom meeting without any kind of assistance, you've probably got the skills that you need, at least when it comes to using assistive technology. And then the rest of it's just all about communicating what your experience was, communicating where the issues were, communicating how things could be better.
So I do have a part two of that question. You don't have to be local then, right? You can kind of be anywhere all over the world to work with you guys at Fable? Or...
Well, currently, Fable works with folks in the United States, and it works with folks in Canada. We are looking to expand outside of those two countries, but it hasn't quite happened yet. But it's something that we are actively pursuing. So if you are outside of Canada or the United States, we cannot bring you on yet. But if you went ahead and filled out our form and applied, then we'd be happy to put you on the waiting list and get back to you as soon as Fable does that international expansion.
Cool.
So are you allowed to disclose at all, Sam, like how big is your community? Is it hundreds? Is it thousands? Is it tens of thousands?
Well, I mean, tens of thousands, millions is the goal, right? That's the goal. We want to have that enormous impact, not only on the accessibility market, but on the employment kind of statistics as well. And we are rapidly growing in order to sort of meet those those big numbers. I just have to. One of the things that's very important to me as I grow the community and that I think about a lot, I want to make sure that our community stays diverse. That we're not sort of bringing on exclusively not only a person with one type of disability, but that we're bringing on folks in different stages of life, folks from different locations across Canada and the United States, all that kind of stuff. But it's also really important to me that the community grows in perfect balance with our customer demand, because I don't want people in our community feeling like, oh my goodness, there's so much work and I'm feeling pressured. I gotta take it all, and I don't want people coming on the platform to work with us and saying, hey, how come I'm not getting access to any work, right? And so it's that delicate art of kind of balancing community availability and customer demand that really is what controls how quickly we grow and whom we bring on. But for folks who are qualified to work with us, who we may not be able to bring on immediately, we do have that waiting list, and we do go back and contact folks and bring them on when the time is right. So we at Fable, when we say you're on a waiting list, it's something that we really mean. It's not like please go. Some companies, right? Don't call us.
Right, we'll get back to you.
Yeah, and then it's never going to happen. No, we really do. It really is a waiting list that we keep and that we have.
That's awesome. So how hard is it to keep that balance between demand for your services and supply of trained talent to do the testing?
Yeah, it's something that can be pretty tricky. It of course, as with any startup, the more you grow and the faster you grow, the less it becomes sort of a not really a problem, but the less it becomes a factor, because of course now balance kind of equals itself out, right? But it is something that we think about a lot, and especially when it comes to communities that perhaps are not as well represented in the web accessibility landscape in other ways. So when we talk about web accessibility, right, the first thing that anyone thinks of is screen reader, right?
Mm-hmm.
And some people tend to believe that web accessibility begins with screen readers and it ends with screen readers, and maybe there's some weird stuff around the edge for screen magnification. right? And as that awareness is changing, um, and as people are realizing, hey, there's these whole groups of other folks who use Dragon and who use voice control and who use Switch and who use all of these other great assistive technologies, and they need to be included. It's really about growing those communities, and about meeting that demand.
Wow.
Because yeah, if there's a takeaway, if you're working in accessibility and you've never thought about user testing, that might be one of them, right? Accessibility is more than just screen readers.
So what would you say are probably some of the most underrepresented corners of the community?
I suspect it's probably folks using Switch systems.
That's what I would have thought.
For a few reasons, because it's a newer technology. It's a less well-known technology. It's a group of folks who are extremely technical and extremely independent and really want to work, but there needs to be a lot more flexibility, around how they work and around when and the hours and that kind of thing, that I think a lot of companies who are just doing, I don't know, a one-time accessibility project just can't provide, right? And so they say, oh, well, we're just going to test with screen reader users and that's it, and we're done. Whereas with Fable, because we are figuring out these hard problems, it makes it possible for companies to include these voices.
I had a quick question, Claudio, if that's okay.
Sure.
Hey guys, my name is Todd Albert. I'm from Boca Code. And for those who can't see me, I have dark hair and dark glasses and a dark mustache with a white beard. So Sam, I was wondering, when you talk about switch systems, would that include like, what is it, Claudio, correct me if I'm wrong, sip and puff and like switches that are used like with like chin switches and things like that as well?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, so it's essentially
question.
something where you're using a button that moves the cursor in some form or another, and you're not actually using like a two-dimensional device, pointing device like a mouse.
Right. Okay. I'm really, one of the things I'm trying to understand better as I teach my students accessibility is, like I know, and I think I might have learned this from you, Claudio, actually, that when we're handling events, and I know this might get a little technical, but when we're handling an events, in JavaScript, which is the language of the web, it's different to use something very specific like an on click or an on mouse over or something that's specific to the device, as opposed to like with a form just saying on submit. And there's a million different ways of submitting a form. So, we're trying, but I don't know a great resource to find out all of that information. So I'm just trying to learn as we go and understand that as best I can.
Well, thank you for your heart, Todd. He's always wants to learn. He's always trying to improve. He's always trying to find a way to be accessible. And that's the goal, right? I think that we all agree that is the goal. So
and Beth and Claudio are doing their best to try and, bring this young fledgling up, into their level.
Absolutely, and one of the things that we say a lot about Fable, both when we're talking about testing and when we're talking about, test early, test often, test frequently, is that accessibility is a constant journey. Accessibility isn't something that you say, I'm gonna make something accessible and now it's done and I never have to think about this again. Accessibility is making sure that it's built into your processes. It's making sure that all of the changes that you make are tested for accessibility. It's making sure that the new stuff that you release is accessible, and it's making sure that as you become aware of new technologies and new types of assistive technology and new types of folks, and new types of devices, new types of operating systems, all that stuff, making sure that you're also accessible to them. So it's there's no reason to feel bad about that learning process and that iterating process and that process of constant improvement, because the first time you ever do accessibility, you're not going to get it perfect, but the point is to keep doing it and to keep iterating and to keep improving. I'm sure that's something that you would probably agree with, Claudio.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Now, I've been seeing a couple of technical questions appearing on the timeline here, and we're going to get to those. But what I'd love to do is kind of steer this conversation for the next 10 or 15 minutes or so, really towards talking about social impact. And, you mentioned, we're talking about the numbers of people in your community, and it kind of seemed, Sam, like if there's any way that you guys were going to have impact, it was going to be through the sheer numbers of people in the community and the sheer amount of involvement. Is there maybe different ways that are more qualitative, or, how do you see you having the biggest impact?
I mean, impact for us is very, very exponential. Let's take the example of I won't name any names because I don't want to pick on anyone in particular, but let's think about a lot of the tools that businesses use internally that they've purchased from some vendor. If that vendor works with Fable and makes their tool accessible, not only has the impact been, that Fable has employed folks to test it and to engage in ongoing research and testing with this product, but when the product becomes accessible, the door has been opened for thousands or hundreds of thousands of people who previously couldn't get any jobs at companies that use this inaccessible tool because the tool is inaccessible, so they couldn't get the job. So when we help companies make accessibility improvements, the impact that we're having is not just on the community that works for us, but it's also on the disability community as a whole, because we're opening those doors and we're making things accessible that weren't accessible before. And whether that's opening doors to employment or to content creation or to content consumption, that's another huge impact. It's like I know open source accessibility evangelists often kind of think of when I make an accessibility change to WordPress or Drupal, think of how many sites that's going to have an accessibility improvement effect on, right?
Right, or even Webflow. If you can get a little bit of influence into basically the tool makers, you really have that sort of exponential impact. And I think you guys have been a little bit modest, because in your intro you haven't bragged about the who's who of clients that Fable has, including the makers of this video conferencing software that we're using right now. But I think you guys are in a fantastic position to be able to see the sort of impact on everyday tools. The second point I really wanted to make is that it's not just about making the tools accessible. Because you could have, for instance, a company like Microsoft, you got Office 365, you could make that perfectly accessible, but then the people in the workplace also have to make the content accessible. And I think it's an easy trap for corporations to fall into, where it's like, oh yeah, well, we're not going to hire anybody blind to work in our accounting because we're too lazy to make our spreadsheets accessible. And we're too lazy to learn how to structure our spreadsheets so that they could work with the screen reader. And there's like this whole, I think, cultural change that has to happen inside of organizations to teach people to do the extra effort that can't be fixed by the software makers.
I agree with you. I do agree with you, but I agree with you to a point. There is cultural change that needs to happen. There is awareness change that needs to happen. But all too often, when I talk to somebody who's just produced an accessible piece of content, I don't know, say a blog and none of their images have alt text, and I go to them and say, hey, could you put some alt text on your images? They come back to me, I have no idea how to do that. and then it turns out that alt text is hidden, 6 layers deep into the settings as like an
Right.
optional feature. I know there was some discussion. I think it's been changed now, but when Twitter introduced its alt text feature, it was turned off by default, right? And so, of course, nobody included alt text because you had to go into your advanced settings and turn it on. And so I think that yes, cultural awareness is necessary, but there is also something to be said for the tools should not only warn you when you're making inaccessible content, but should help you do the right thing. Because, in my experience, most people do want to do the right thing. And if the tools support it and make it easy and make it a first class experience, why is it so easy to upload an image but so hard to add alt text?
Right.
Then we'll start to really see accessibility, because people not only understand why they should do it, but it's right there. It's easy. Because if you need to be an accessibility expert in order to produce accessible content with your tool, I tend to think that the tool is letting you down a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be mainstream. I mean, accessibility absolutely has to be mainstream, where, even, your interns, your admins, people that you would think are far removed from the website know how to use their products accessibly. I mean, it absolutely has to be that way. To your point about like making the tools, request accessibility, there's a neat feature in Outlook that if you go into Outlook, you can request accessible email. So essentially, somebody sends you an email with an image that doesn't have alt text to it, it'll send them a little nagging reminders like, no, this so-and-so has requested that the email that you send to them be accessible, which is, I think, kind of like an extra step or an extra direction in which you can take collaborative tools in.
I'd like to jump in, because I think we can actually push that a little further to like what Sam's point was, things being buried. There's this whole concept of like, defensible design. So creating something so that it doesn't get used in the wrong way. So when you think of physical spaces and public spaces, you'll see a lot of the way like benches are designed so that it doesn't get used for sleeping instead of just sitting. And a lot of design thought goes into that. Why couldn't we have that every time you upload it, that you cannot upload a photo without having alt text? It's still an option. And if we continue to give it as an option, then people will always misuse the feature. So can we actually include it by default that you can't go ahead without this? It's nice to see that alt text is being pushed forward, but how do we make it easy so that everyone can just do it without making that mistake, or without having to request, oh, please give me alt text for this image?
Yeah, I think it's, you have to go further than that. I mean, it can't just, it shouldn't just be that you're requesting to do it, or that you're or that you're adding captions because you can, or you're adding alt text because you can. I actually think people have to want to do that. So I almost see like scoring or gamifying it, like, that like on Twitter, you'd get a score for how good or how accessible your content is, or you get like percentages, just like profile completion percentages, that would actually kind of encourage you or nudge you in the direction of being more accessible.
Well, there are a lot of things that go into the content we see. I think it would be very interesting as we talk about big data and about AI and about all these other things that you've said that are coming up. If we could include accessibility in some of these models, I mean, what if captions were required in order for recommendations to surface your video, or in order for it to go viral, that kind of thing?
Oh, absolutely. Like Google's even, I mean, and every now and then you hear this rumor that Google's considering it in terms of, looking at the accessibility of a web page in terms of how they figure that into their algorithm. And we all kind of like hold our breath. You're like, really? Is this really going to happen?
I mean, I think in the case of search engines, it happens naturally, right? Because a website that is more accessible is just more searchable because it's more machine readable. I think about when I think about that, I think about the kind of webcomic scene. I don't know how familiar folks are with various webcomics, but a lot of them found that they needed to start offering transcripts so that people could find the particular panel of the comic that they were looking for.
Wow.
And then that expanded to, there are a lot of webcomics over on the might be anyway one of the kind of wikis on Reddit. We maintain a list of comics that provide accessible transcriptions, and that was sort of started because, hey, wouldn't it be nice if we could search this stuff? And then, hey, as long as we're doing this anyway, why don't we actually provide an accessible transcription of our comic?
Yeah, and you know what I think also is that to be truly accessible, we shouldn't need to ask, right? It should be automatic. I think things need to be automatic or it's still not really equitable, right? So if we go on a website as hearing or visual people and we could just search it without having to ask for something to be changed or ask to have captions or ask for an interpreter, to ask people with disabilities, we'll never see equality until it becomes automatic. And that is my goal and my hope, that people will just do it. It's a great tagline. It's a wonderful, slogan, just do it. But really, it's just that important to not have to wait to be asked to provide accessibility. So that is my hope, that it will become habit. Everybody now.
I mean,
it was burning inside of me to say, and I couldn't wait any longer.
Absolutely, that's so important, and not having to make the request, even in little ways. I mean, if we want to talk about an interesting service, for example, like Netflix, if you turn on audio description or captions or whatever in your profile, they stay on whenever they're available, right? Whereas some other websites, for every single video you watch, you have to turn it on over and over and over again. No, I do want these turned on. I do want captions. I do want audio description. And it makes such a difference to stop having to do that every single time.
Right.
Yeah, having it be sticky to your profile, because in my house, we watch Netflix with captions because it's in my profile. But if my daughter wants to watch it on her profile, it doesn't even show up, which is excellent. And I don't have to remember to turn captions on. They're just there. So I start seeing subtitles. What's amazing is I just realized how much I missed by not having the captions. So you'll know the characters' names. You'll know what that sound is that you're not quite making out in the background. So even as a hearing person, there's just so much benefit to using captions with Netflix.
It's funny you should say that. So many features that start out as accessibility features make things better for everyone. Whether it's the example that we always talk about curb cuts and people with strollers using them, right? When you make a product accessible, you're making it better for everyone. Sort of a more hilarious and a little bit out there example is that of my mom. I mean, she lives in a house with two blind folks, but she is now to the point where she refuses to watch TV without audio description turned on, because she's saying, well, okay, yeah, but I want to do my knitting while I'm watching TV. I don't want to have to look at it the whole time, right?
That's awesome. That's great. But I know we've kind of gone down the rabbit hole of talking about Netflix, and we got a little bit more technical. But I mean, let's talk big picture. And I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit before I opened it up to Q&A, in terms of where do you guys see Fable being in 5 years from now? I imagine demand is going to take off like a rocket for you folks, and you're going to have a hard time keeping up with it. So if you have that sort of demand, what do you picture yourselves doing in the market or in the community?
I absolutely agree with you that demand is going to continue to increase. I know the new kind of proposed WCAG guidelines are going to start to have requirements in them about actually having products tested with folks who have disabilities. Not just exclusively relying on automated testing. So that's gonna continue to expand. And from the community side of it, the place where I'd like to get to is, we were talking a little while back about folks who newly experience disability, or folks who do experience disability but haven't been able to grow up with the digital technology and being a digital native in the same way that I have. I would love to see Fable be able to kind of run training programs in order to help folks get comfortable, master their assistive technology, become professionals at using the web, become advanced users of their technology, because all of that stuff is so crucial to life today. And so if we can give more folks access to that training and more folks access to that technology, not only can we offer them access to employment, but it will exponentially improve the level of independence that they'll be able to have, and kind of the number of things that they'll be able to do once they can fully participate in the digital world. And so that's like a huge impact that I could see Fable having as we grow, because as demand grows, the community will continue to grow, and that gives us real opportunities to have those impacts, not only in getting employment to folks who already have the assistive technology and who already have the training, but getting folks the technology and getting them the training as well.
Wow.
That was from the kind of community side, which is super where I am right now and where my head's at. Perhaps Alvar wants to jump in a little bit more on the on the marketing side. I don't know if I answered that part of the question at all.
Well, Sam, I think you did, because everything that we do, we call ourselves a social enterprise. We're very much, purpose driven, and we want to make sure that we are contributing to providing more and more employment opportunities to people with disabilities, and think of, the app-based work that we're offering as a new way of employment. But I think, Claudia, to your point of like, what's the 5-year goal? Like, we're just scratching the surface when it comes to accessibility still, right? People are starting to recognize the importance of engaging with people with disabilities, engaging with people who have unique skill sets. Like, I will never use a screen reader the way Sam does. I will never be able to listen to an audiobook the pace in which Sam does. So I think one of the bigger goals that we want to see is this unique skill set recognized in digital teams. We want to make sure that every product team has someone representing the needs of people with disabilities. We want to make sure that everything is built from the get-go. I think we're talking about consumer-facing apps. We're just starting to talk about like internal tools. We have so much to go to make sure that people with disabilities are fully integrated. And I think for Fable, we've proven from our growth that we have a lot of potential, and we're excited to kind of lead that charter across internationally.
Wow. And you know what comes to my mind that pops up is the wonderful quote from Crip Camp. Nothing about us without us, and having a seat at the table. And that is just so key, because we can't make decisions for people without including the people who really use it on a daily basis. So I agree completely with you. Having a seat at the table is the priority, making sure that everybody is represented. I agree.
Exactly. And as we get folks seats at the table, in 5 years, things are moving so fast. Where are we going to be? We're now starting to have real, actual conversations about accessibility in video games, which is a conversation that wasn't taking place 10 years ago. But as these continue to catch on, I think there's also going to be new conversations. What is accessibility in augmented reality? What is accessibility in virtual reality? Right? What is accessibility, and how does it affect the development, training, and deployment of AI? There are so many questions that are the discussions are just beginning, and that Fable, because of the community of folks that we work with, I think it already has and will continue to have a very important seat in all of these discussions.
That's awesome. And I saw something, and then we'll move on. I don't want to take up too much time, but I saw today when I was at Boca Code again, they're teaching about UX, and they're teaching about accessibility. And I think that's just so awesome to see it being taught in the schools, and that's where you're going to see the change happen. I had chills knowing that they're teaching accessibility digitally before it's released. As we were saying, it's easier to include it while we're building it instead of adding it later. So I think that is awesome with ADA as well. I think personally it should be taught in all universities, because every part of the ADA fits with every profession that people are getting their degrees from. So I was excited to see that.
Absolutely.
So do you guys think we should open it up to questions from everyone?
Yes.
I know John's been waiting very patiently with a question. He had his hand up a while ago. So absolutely, you get first question.
All right.
I just realized when I jumped in that I wasn't muted, so sorry about that. When I raised my hand earlier, I typically would throw my questions in a Q&A chat panel, but I was in the process of putting my 12-month-old down, and it was just a really engaging conversation. And I had a question that I wanted to throw in at that point, but you guys actually addressed it. But I did want to jump in now as we talk about the future of Fable. I think everybody who's on this call is listening, saying, man, what a great opportunity. As a service provider for businesses that are trying to address, like authentically address the accessibility of their properties, but for the employment opportunity, for people who have traditionally just not had as many opportunities as everybody else, we see this great opportunity. And you look at it like what Uber did, coming into a market and saying, hey, all of you people out there, millions and millions of people, I've got an opportunity for you. Let's go make some money. And it was great. For Fable, if we're relying on businesses, even large institutions, coming to Fable directly and saying, hey, we want to leverage your services, that's a small corner of the internet. Would there ever be a possibility for Fable to partner with one of the myriad companies that are claiming to fix digital accessibility and say, hey, not only do we fix the digital accessibility of your website, but we also certify it with people, with humans from our partner Fable? Because imagine, I know the entire world is very soured on the idea of an Accessibility, but if Accessibility said, yeah, but wait, we also partnered with Fable and they showed us how things are inaccessible and we're working towards it. And the Accessibility agreement isn't done until Fable certifies it. Now think about how many clients Fable has, how many employees Fable has. Is that type of partnership a possibility at some point?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I think we're already doing that. We have a partnership with Site Improve, who is an automated tool provider, and we work with them and their clients to make sure that they are not only doing automated testing, but they're also doing manual testing and validating their accessibility implementations with real people. I think what we need is, Beth, you kind of indicated to having like compliance improving. I think what we need the shift to happen is, can we get that focus on user first approach to it and not just a checklist of items. So I think it's not just accessibility tools. We can partner with QA testing tools. We can partner with research tools. We can partner with any company that has any software testing capacity and help them make sure that they're integrating people with disabilities in that process. Because ultimately the biggest stamp is that a person can use it. And that's what you want to know. And what I'd like to see is our laws moving towards that, and we're starting to see signs of that.
So I had a little bit a question that kind of this triggered, which is, to date, it almost seems like what you folks are doing is you're doing functional testing on finished software products or software products that are, fairly well developed. Are you doing a lot of work where you're shifting left into earlier stages where you could, almost be like a focus group for concepts like, hey, I've got this new business idea, like an audio only, social app that's out there, like I've got this business idea. Can I test that with you folks and have your teams come up with potential issues that business concept would have? Are you doing that? Is that in the works?
I mean, we certainly have the kinds of engagements with members of the community that could already help to support some of that. We already do with some folks. A lot of testing of alphas, a lot of testing of kind of prototypes and prototype reviews, things like that, shifting accessibility testing a lot earlier in the development process, as opposed to like waiting until everything's done and then suddenly discovering it's inaccessible and doesn't work. So we're doing kind of a lot of that work. I don't know that we've shifted quite as far left as sort of validating people's business ideas. Quite yet, and it's certainly something interesting to consider and sort of trying to figure out how that would work. Also, what that would entail and sort of what kind of it's the age-old question, right? How implemented does something need to be before it can be tested for accessibility, or before you can start to talk about accessibility? And you want to get that as early in the process as you possibly can. But I know you guys will be talking about it soon with Stark, and I know it's been talked about some other places, is like the challenge for, say, a screen reader tester when it comes to doing a prototype review, right? And how can we shift that testing further left, things like that.
John, you bring up the accessibility usability scale, and that's actually something I've written papers about, like the system usability scale and how that could be transferred over, fairly straightforwardly to accessibility. Do you want to maybe describe a little bit of what you're doing with that, Sam or Alwar?
Yeah, I can jump in, and Sam actually helped with also creating and testing the accessible usability scale, but I can give an overview. You've had the system usability scale for a really long time, and that's been the way to evaluate how usable a product is. But at that time, the needs of people with disabilities weren't considered. So the way the questions were framed will not apply to someone with a disability who's using assistive technology. So our goal with the accessibility usability scale was to ask the appropriate questions so that we can ask assistive technology users about how usable was the experience for them. And we made it a free tool. We're also researching and experimenting. It's what we consider as, a work in progress that always require tweaks. The system usability scale, Sam, correct me if I'm wrong, like it hadn't been tweaked since it got released, right?
Yeah, that's
in the
absolutely
in the 80s.
Yeah. And that's such a problem. Like every design has to be tweaked, and the fact that this was designed in the 80s and no one had tweaked any of the questions, and we know how we interact with technology literally changes every year or every 6 months nowadays. So our goal with the accessibility usability scale is to constantly just find ways, test it out more, get feedback from people with disabilities, and make sure it's making it easier for them to communicate how usable the experience was for them. Sam, did you want to jump in specifically on like questions that was tailored?
So there were a number of questions that were tailored, and I'm frantically going through and not finding them. We gave a presentation about the AUS a little while back at as part of Site Tech Global, and I can't find my notes there primarily because I don't want to wing it and misspeak in some way, because this stuff is so important. But the tailoring that was done to all of the questions was really important, because when you sort of looked at SUS, it was very difficult for a user of assistive technology in some cases to understand, like, what is this question even asking, and in other ways to figure out how does this apply to me. I mean, some of it was as simple as referring to you know assistive technology in some of the questions, and some of it was just as simple as like changing the word system to the word website or to the word app, because like who thinks today of they just did something on a website and were you able to use this system? What?
Right.
What is that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the way you guys did it was actually very elegant, and you guys made it make sense without really changing the spirit of the questions.
Exactly. And I know there's been some ongoing research and some ongoing discussion about like can you mix AUS and SUS results together? Is that meaningful? Is that not meaningful? I mean, there's all kinds of discussions that are continuing to go on, and that's why it's so important that Fable released it as a free tool, because we learn about how other people are using it, and that gives us insight into further refinements.
If there's one more question I would wish for, it's would you recommend this to a friend? And what comes out of that question, or how likely would you be to recommend this to a friend on a scale of 1 to 10? And that is the Net Promoter Score. And that is the be all and end all for most marketers. So for me, for instance, my day job is with a major cruise firm. That is the most important score in terms of, what the overall guest experience is like. So if you could take that and apply that to your accessibility testing, you may find that there's an enormous disconnect between net promoter scores between abled and disabled people, or that kind of proves or points statistically to the real mismatch that you find in usability between something that's built for abled people and then just sort of like half-baked compliance-based sort of accessibility that comes on the other end of it.
I mean, I think that question about like would you recommend that to a friend is super interesting, and we've had a lot of different chats about it, and sort of iterated on that and thought about that a lot, and I mean, there's kind of a few problems there and a few things to consider. Like, first of all, when you say would I recommend it to my friend, do you mean my friend who does not use any assistive technology, right? Is that who you mean? And if you mean that, well, I mean, there's a lot of websites that are totally inaccessible to me that my friends seem to enjoy using. So like, if I had a bad and accessible experience, do I recommend it to my friend? I mean, their experience might be fine. They don't use assistive technology. Or like, if I had a really accessible experience, I mean that's great, and I'd probably recommend that. But like, is it going to work just as well for them? Like, it's an interesting question that immediately, especially in the concept of accessibility and accessibility testing, becomes more complicated than it seems at first blush.
Interesting. My friend from the Lighthouse of Broward, Eric Barrett, had a question for you folks. He had his hand up a second ago. And Eric is somebody that before I even found out about Fable, we were trying to see how we could develop a valued testing program down here locally to be able to do the sort of testing that Fable does. So, Eric, come join us.
Yes, good evening. And thank you so much for the invite. I really gained a lot tonight. Sam, really, really terrific stuff. My question is, do you guys, my name is Eric. Description I'm going to say is decorative. Um, no, I'm just kidding. I'm wearing a maroon shirt and balding. Anyhow, do you guys partnership with agencies serving the blind to help with recruiting? I'm an assistive technology instructor at the Lighthouse here, and we turn out a decent amount of people who become good at using their screen readers. So I was just curious if you do partnership, what those partnerships look like.
We absolutely do partnership with agencies, we're very customizable and flexible in that way. In some cases it's just getting into agency newsletters, whereas in other cases it's working directly with a particular agency to sort of help them figure out, who might be a good candidate to work with us, or what kind of training some of their folks might need in order to be able to work with us, that kind of thing. And one of the reasons that we like partnering with agencies is because there are two recruitment methods that kind of work especially well, and those being, first of all, word of mouth referrals from our existing community members, because word of mouth is like the ultimate trust builder, and working with agencies that are trusted in these various communities. And the reason those two things are so important is because, like, if you, I don't know, went on Facebook and saw someone saying, hey, there's work available, you can work from home and it's flexible and you can work at your own hours, right? The immediately, oh, this is a pyramid scheme, or I'm going to be stuffing envelopes, right?
Right.
and so we need to get through that, and we need to help folks understand that, no, this is a real opportunity. This isn't a pyramid scam. This isn't, stuffing envelopes. This isn't like a work from home multi-level marketing thing. This is real employment that really, not only really does pay and compensate fairly, but that is work that really makes a difference and that makes an impact. And the best ways to do that are by word of mouth referrals from our existing community members, and by working with partners that are trusted in the community.
Thank you very much.
Oh, if there's one thing I could only wish for tonight, that you guys would go forth and find a way of working with each other. Like, that would make me so happy, and that would be like the best thing that came out of tonight. Seriously.
Hey, I'm always open to receive emails and to have discussions and to explore these different things. So absolutely, send me an email. I'm not sure if my email is showing on Zoom, but Claudio, feel free to pass it around to folks if it isn't.
So do we have any other questions? Because one of the things I'd like to do is maybe just turn this into an open conversation and give Beth a break.
No, signing if you're going to talk. So if you're not going to talk, then I could stop. It wouldn't be equitable.
But honestly, it's been amazing having you guys here. Sam, Alvar, Jax. Thank you guys so much for giving me your evening, to be able to share with us, what Fable's been doing. And I hope sometime in the future, I can bring you guys back in here and we'll have a whole different conversation of how much you've been able to accomplish in this short time. So thank you guys so much.